My own son sold my jewelry. While I was in ICU, he regretted it when I hit play in court. When I collapsed in the break room at work, the last thing I remember was the sharp clang of my coffee mug hitting the floor. I'd been running on empty for months, long hours, short nights, holding down 2 part-time jobs just to help keep my son's family afloat. There wasn't time for fatigue, but apparently my body decided it had enough. They told me later I was unconscious for 4 days. A brain bleed, they said. The kind that usually kills people over 50, if not in the moment, then slowly, quietly, in the days that follow. My odds weren't good. But the worst part? It wasn't the pain, or the panic, or even the fear of dying alone. It was that when I finally opened my eyes again, no one from my family was there. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law, not a single soul from the people I'd spent the last 3 decades bending over backwards for. The nurse smiled brightly when I stirred, told me she was glad to see me back. She'd been checking in every hour. Then she added, casually, like it was nothing, "Your family stopped by the first night. They left some things in a bag. Haven't been back since, but don't worry, we've been here." Stopped by the first night. I blinked slowly, trying to keep my face neutral. My body felt like it had been dragged through gravel. My head throbbed. My chest burned when I breathed. I didn't even know what day it was. But what I did know, immediately, with icy certainty, was that something was very, very wrong. My son, Daniel, had always been distant, polite but cold, the kind of man who remembered birthdays only if reminded by his wife, Mira. She was sharp, too sharp. Mira never liked me. She thought I was too simple, too old-fashioned. She used to joke that my greatest skill was polishing silverware. But still, I had raised Daniel alone, worked my hands raw to put him through college, sold the only piece of land I inherited from my parents to help him and Mira buy their house when their mortgage application got denied. I'd even handed over my wedding bangles, pure gold passed down from my mother, saying, "Give these to your wife. She's family now." Every time I gave something, I convinced myself it would bring us closer, that I was earning love, that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, they would see me. But as I lay there in that sterile white hospital bed, the IV drip humming softly, something snapped. They didn't come back. Not on day 2, not on day 3. I asked the nurse if anyone had called. She checked the logs. Nothing. Not a voicemail, not a missed call, not even a damn text message. On the 4th day, I sat up slowly, my spine screaming in protest, and reached for the little plastic bag labeled with my name. Inside was a change of clothes, a comb, and a single envelope. No letter, just a bank withdrawal slip. $3,000 gone, my emergency savings account. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It was happening. They thought I wasn't going to make it. They were already cleaning up. That evening, a nurse I hadn't met before came in to change the sheets. She was young, probably in her 20s, and chatty in a kind, almost sisterly way. As she fluffed the pillows, she said something that sent my heart straight into my throat. "I think it's so brave what you're doing, planning ahead like this. Most people don't want to talk about end-of-life stuff. But your daughter-in-law, Mira, right? She seemed so organized." I stared at her. She continued, smiling innocently. "She came in with a man, said he was your financial advisor. They asked about will access, and if the hospital had a notary. I said we don't offer that, but they seemed like they had everything under control." Will access. My mouth went dry. I hadn't updated my will in years. Everything I owned, the house, my account balances, the jewelry, was still listed under "to be divided between Daniel and any surviving spouse or grandchildren." They were trying to seal the deal. I pressed a hand to my chest. My heart thudded like it wanted to leap out of my ribcage. I forced a smile at the nurse. "That's very helpful. Thank you." But inside, I was shaking. Not from fear, from fury. When the nurse left, I reached for my phone, my old beat-up flip phone. It was still functional, no new messages. I turned it off again. Then I stared at the ceiling for a long time, blanketed in a silence that didn't feel like peace. It felt like betrayal. I whispered to myself, they're going to sell everything. That night, I didn't sleep because I remembered something else. The small fireproof safe under my bed, hidden behind the wardrobe back at home. That's where my mother's ruby ring was, the gold earrings from my wedding day, the antique necklace that had survived 3 generations. I told Mira about the safe years ago when she was organizing the closets. Told her what was in it. At the time, I said, if anything ever happens to me, it's yours. I thought that meant if I died. But to them, I already had. And suddenly, I knew. I wasn't going to die. Not now. Not before I made sure they paid for what they were doing. Every ounce of kindness they'd twisted into opportunity. Every act of love they turned into leverage. I wouldn't say a word. I would recover. Quietly. Carefully. Then I'd come home. And when I did, I wouldn't knock. The nurses didn't ask why I stopped taking the painkillers. I think they assumed I was trying to feel alive again. In truth, I needed clarity. I needed to stay alert, not drift through days in a medicated haze while the people I loved turned my life into a garage sale. 2 days later, I asked to be discharged. The doctor raised an eyebrow. You're still recovering. Most people need 2 more weeks of monitored care. I smiled politely. I don't have the luxury of lying in bed while my life is being picked apart like a carcass. He paused, then quietly signed the papers. Don't push yourself too hard, he said. You've been through a lot. He had no idea. The hospital social worker arranged a cab and helped me down in a wheelchair. I gave her a fake address and thanked her sincerely. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I was going somewhere I could think. That first night in the cheap motel room, the silence was heavier than anything I'd ever known. I sat on the bed with a bottle of water, a paper bag of crackers, and the one item I'd managed to keep hidden even in the hospital, a USB stick I'd sewn into the lining of my coat pocket months before after Mira's second suspicious, accidental login to my email. On that drive home, I'd started remembering little things, strange things. How 3 months ago Daniel had asked casually, "You ever think about updating your will?" How Mira, 2 weeks before my collapse, had said, "Those old pieces of jewelry, if something ever happened to you, would you want them sold or kept in the family?" I hadn't paid much attention at the time. I thought it was just curiosity, maybe even bonding. What a fool I was. Now I replayed those memories frame by frame, like a detective in my own life. The next morning, I called my friend Rima. We hadn't spoken in months. She had moved 2 towns over to be closer to her grandchildren. She didn't hesitate. "What happened?" she asked, breath catching. "I saw your name in a prayer circle. Are you okay?" "No," I said flatly, "but I will be." Rima let me stay in her guest room without asking a single question. She made tea and let me sleep. But on the second day, when I emerged from the bedroom wearing the same cardigan and blank expression, she pulled up a chair across from me and asked one thing. "Who do we need to bury?" I burst out laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was the first time someone saw me. Not as a weak old woman recovering from a health scare, but as someone burning alive on the inside. "No burials," I said, "just a reckoning." Together we got to work. Rima's son-in-law was a lawyer. He agreed to meet me after hearing just a portion of what I had to say. I brought everything I had, bank statements, pawn shop withdrawal alerts, even the voice recordings I'd kept on my phone of old conversations with Mira and Daniel. Then came the final piece, the security camera footage. Rima, bless her suspicious heart, had installed one in my hallway 2 years ago just in case, after her cousin's son had stolen money from her purse. I hadn't even remembered it until she mentioned it. It backed up to a cloud storage account I hadn't accessed in over a year. But when I did, there they were. Mira, Daniel, and Mira's cousin, Armin, digging through my bedroom like vultures. I watched in slow motion as Mira pulled the safe from behind the wardrobe, punched in the code I had once stupidly told her, and opened it. She didn't hesitate, not even for a second. The gold was swept into bags. My late husband's watch. The ruby set my mother gave me the night before my wedding. Even the delicate hairpin I'd worn at my college graduation, wrapped in silk cloth and tied with my childhood ribbon. Daniel stood by the door. He wasn't even ashamed. He just looked bored, as if the entire act was tedious. Then came the audio. Rima leaned in as I hit play. I thought she'd break the glass she was holding. Mira's voice. She's probably brain dead. We should have done this years ago. Daniel, I just want it done before the others ask questions. Keep the receipts. We'll tell her it's missing, or claim she gave it to us. She won't remember anything anyway. I sat there, hands folded neatly in my lap, my face empty. But inside, I was seething. I turned to Rima's son-in-law, Faraz, and said, I want to reclaim everything. I want them out of my house, and I want every single penny accounted for. Can we do that? He smiled grimly. Oh, we can do a lot more than that. Over the next 2 weeks, we assembled a case file, CCTV footage, bank transfers, signed pawn slips, a notarized letter from my old neighbor who saw Mira removing bags from my house. I stayed quiet. Not a word to Daniel. Not a whisper to Mira. I called my bank, revoked every shared access permission. I updated my will, removed Daniel's name entirely. Instead, I added Rima, my church's women's shelter, and the nurse who held my hand while I drifted between this world and the next. I was already dead to them, so it made perfect sense to write them out like ghosts. But I wasn't done yet, because dead women don't walk. And the next time I stepped through that door, it wouldn't be alone. I didn't tell them I was coming home, didn't warn them, didn't call, didn't hint. I wanted to see their faces when the door opened and I walked through it, not like a grieving old woman clinging to survival, but like something they thought they'd buried and forgotten, something they thought would never speak again. The day I returned, the house was unusually loud. Laughter, clinking glasses, music, celebration. I stood outside the front gate dressed simply, slacks, blouse, hair pinned back, nothing dramatic, but tucked beneath my arm was a small black folder. Inside it, 3 things. 1. A flash drive with the hallway footage. 2. A full list of stolen items and pawn shop receipts, each one dated and signed. 3. A letter addressed to the family who mistook my silence for death. I rang the bell. Nobody came. So I opened the gate and walked straight in. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Why would they worry? The only person who ever cared about safety was the one they assumed had flatlined in a hospital bed. The living room was filled with people. Mira's family, a few of Daniel's co-workers, bottles of wine, party platters, gifts stacked on the coffee table. Someone was cutting cake. I paused in the doorway just long enough to let the silence ripple through them. Then Mira turned. Her face froze mid-smile. Daniel dropped the glass in his hand. The crash was loud, but not louder than the sound of my heels clicking across the hardwood floor. Mira's voice cracked first. Mom? I set the folder down on the table beside the cake. Don't worry, I said, I'm not a ghost. Daniel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I looked around at the guests, half of them staring, the other half awkwardly pretending to look away, some already inching toward the door like they didn't want to be part of what was about to unfold. Smart. I brought a few things, I said calmly, tapping the folder. Mira swallowed hard. We were told. What? I said, voice still polite. That I wasn't going to make it? That it was time to start dividing the spoils? No one breathed. Daniel finally found his voice. You should have told us you were okay. I did, I said. I sent a message. On day 5. No reply. He blinked. Lying already. We didn't get it. I smiled faintly. Of course not. I lifted the flash drive from the folder and held it up like a match before a gas leak. This is from my hallway. It's synced to cloud backup. You remember, don't you, Mira? You helped me set it up 2 years ago. Her skin drained of color. I kept going. It shows you entering my room, opening my safe, packing up the contents, selling the jewelry, some of which didn't even belong to you. My mother's ring, my wedding earrings, my husband's watch. Mira's hands trembled. We were just trying to handle things. Daniel stepped in quickly, voice hard. You weren't even supposed to come home this soon. You needed rehab. I turned to him, slowly. Oh, I see. So if I died, that would have made it okay? He didn't answer. I reached into the folder again and pulled out the inventory list. Here's a breakdown of everything that was removed, sold, or damaged. Each item cross-referenced with photos, appraisals, and sale receipts. Your cousin Armin even signed a pawn slip with his full name, Sloppy. Someone in the back stifled a laugh. Mira's cousin flushed red and started backing toward the door. And finally, I said, taking out the letter, this one's not for you, it's for the lawyer. Already filed, but I thought you should see a copy. Daniel looked down at the bold black heading. Notice of civil claim. Personal property theft, fraud, and willful deception. Wait, he said, voice rising. You're suing us? No, I said, I'm pressing charges. Gasps, audible now. Whispers slithered through the room like snakes. Daniel exploded. You're doing this to your own son after everything we've done for you? I laughed then, not loudly, just enough. Everything you've done for me, like stealing from my safe, laughing over my coma, lying about where my things went? Or do you mean the way you tried to declare me mentally incompetent to access my own bank account? Mira blanched. Daniel turned to her, eyes wide. You said that was handled. It was, she hissed, until she walked in like goddamn Lazarus. Now it was my turn to lean in. I didn't come back from the dead, I said. I came back from survival, and now I'm here to reclaim what's mine. Daniel's voice cracked. It's just jewelry. No, I said, suddenly fierce. It was my mother's hands that clasped that necklace around my neck before my wedding. My husband's fingers that fastened that bracelet after our son was born. My identity, my history, my life. I turned toward the guests now. Let them all hear it. They didn't sell gold. They sold my bones, and they laughed doing it. No one moved. Then Mira's mother muttered under her breath, "Drama queen." She probably hid half of it herself and is trying to milk it for attention. I didn't even look at her. I looked at Mira. You didn't just sell heirlooms. You broke the chain. You thought I was gone and you couldn't even wait for the soil to settle. Well, surprise. I turned back to the cake, now sagging on the table. Consider this your last family gathering with me in it. And I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just walked out. Past the silence, past the shame, past the weight of 1,000 thankless sacrifices, because for the first time in years, I wasn't part of their story anymore. I was writing my own. I didn't go back to Rima's that night. I checked into a quiet, high-end hotel on the other side of the city, where no one would know my name or recognize my face. The kind of place with silent hallways, thick curtains, and a concierge who didn't ask questions. As the elevator climbed to the top floor, I stared at my reflection in the mirrored walls. For the first time in decades, I didn't see a caregiver or a housekeeper or a mother clutching at empty hopes. I saw a woman sharpening. That night, I sat by the window and wrote a second letter, not for Daniel or Mira, for the court. A declaration of ownership, a lifetime of receipts, photos of each jewelry piece, most of them taken over the years when I still believed I'd hand them down with pride. I attached voice recordings, Mira casually mocking me for hoarding junk, Daniel's bored tone as he asked when I planned to hand things over. Each file, each document felt like stitching a wound shut, not to forget, but to preserve the scar with purpose. In the morning, Faraz called. "The claim has been filed," he said. "I've also submitted the request for asset recovery. The pawn shop is cooperating. They recognized your name." "Good," I said. "But there's more. Mira's cousin has already offered to testify. He's trying to avoid charges." Of course he was. I almost laughed. These people had loyalty only to themselves. "You'll be getting a court summons within a week," Faraz added. "I suggest you find a more permanent address so we can list it for correspondence." I knew exactly where I wanted to go. I arrived at the house the next day, not to stay, but to reclaim. Mira answered the door, looking as if she hadn't slept. Her eyes were ringed with dark circles, her lips chapped from anxiety chewing. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice brittle. I stepped past her. "You might want to check your email," I said flatly. "The court order came through. The property title has been frozen pending investigation. That means you can't sell it, can't rent it, can't do a damn thing without my permission." Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs, half-dressed, jaw clenched. "You're ruining our lives." I turned to face him, hands folded. "You stole mine first." He stomped down the stairs. "Do you know how humiliating it is to have your mother sue you? People are talking. Our neighbors, Mira's parents, even my boss. You've destroyed my reputation." I tilted my head. "Oh no, not your reputation. Not the thing you threw me under a bus for." "We were desperate," he shouted. "You don't know what we're dealing with. Mira's credit card debt, my salary cuts, the mortgage." I cut him off. "Number, you don't get to do that. You don't get to wave your bills in my face like a bloody flag and expect me to hand over my dignity as bandages." Mira scoffed from behind me. "You've always been dramatic." I spun on her. "You drugged me, Mira." She blinked. "What?" "The night I collapsed. You handed me tea. Do you remember that?" Her silence was louder than any scream. I took a slow breath. "Don't worry, I'm not pressing charges for that. Yet. But I did mention it to Faraz. If you ever try to come near me again, or interfere with this case, it becomes a criminal investigation." Daniel stepped in, voice trembling. "You really want this to go to court? Air all our dirty laundry in public? You think that makes you look good?" "I'm not interested in looking good," I said coldly. "I'm interested in justice." He exhaled hard, pacing. "You're acting like a stranger, like we never meant anything to you." "You didn't," I said. "Not when it counted." Mira folded her arms. "So what's your plan? You gonna sell the house out from under us?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I'll donate it, or burn it down and build a shelter over the ashes." Daniel's face turned red. "You're not thinking clearly. You need help. This is unhinged." I reached into my bag and pulled out the updated deed documents. "This is thinking clearly. This is 20 years of self-denial, unpaid labor, and unconditional love, finally waking up." Mira's voice dropped. "If you do this, if you don't walk away quietly we'll go to the media. Tell everyone you're mentally unstable. You faked your coma for attention. You're a bitter, lonely woman who wants to ruin her son's life because she couldn't handle being replaced." I stepped closer until we were face to face. "You'd be shocked how well bitterness fuels a legal campaign." She took a step back. Daniel threw his hands in the air. "So this is it? You want revenge?" I laughed, not loudly, just enough. "I already have it." They stood in the doorway, shadows of the people I once hoped would love me. And I realized then I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. I turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Daniel called after me. "Home," I said. "Somewhere you'll never be invited again." The house I moved into wasn't lavish. It wasn't one of those revenge-fueled purchases with chandeliers and security gates and ocean views. It was modest, brick, quiet street, a little overgrown around the edges. But it was mine. Every drawer, every wall, every breath of space. Mine. I unpacked slowly, methodically, one item at a time. No rush, no distractions, just silence, and the steady rhythm of memory creeping in with every box I opened. The third drawer down in my travel suitcase held a small linen pouch. I sat on the bed, turned it over in my palm, and let the contents spill gently onto the blanket. 2 earrings, one earring back missing, a thin chain snapped in the middle, a ring, rubies surrounded by faded gold, the underside scorched, where the metal had been tested for purity. They'd tried to sell these. The pawn shop owner, bless his conscience, had recognized the craftsmanship, unique, antique, likely sentimental. He said something felt off, so he tucked the items away, logged the transaction, and held on to them, just in case the owner came looking. Out of everything stolen, these were all I got back, but to me, they were a funeral. I picked up the ring and pressed it to my lips. My mother gave me that ring on the day I turned 18. We'd had nothing, just a 1-bedroom flat, stale bread on good days, and shame on bad ones. But she'd saved this ring, hidden it in the lining of her sari blouse for over a decade. I want you to wear it when you go into the world, she told me. So when people try to make you feel small, you remember the women you come from. I wore it on my wedding day, on my first job interview, the day I gave birth to Daniel. And now I was holding it like a relic of a civilization destroyed by people I raised. Because that's what it felt like. They didn't just steal from me, they desecrated a lineage. They dug their fingers into the flesh of my past and tore out its heart without flinching. I spent the next week cataloging everything I could prove I'd owned. I submitted photos to the recovery claim, attached voice recordings, posted a private bounty on certain missing pieces through Rima's extended jewelry contacts. But I knew most of it was gone, melted down, traded for cash. Pieces of my life turned into cold, anonymous metal. And Mira had the audacity to call it junk. It was during one of those long, late nights of listing missing items that I came across a folder I hadn't opened in years. Inside were scans of handwritten letters, some from my mother, some from my husband before he passed, notes I'd kept from Daniel's childhood, crayon drawings, misspelled "I love you, mama" messages. I sat on the floor surrounded by the ghosts of people who no longer existed. Daniel, the little boy who ran home to show me his math test, didn't exist anymore. Daniel, the man who forged my name to empty a safe while I lay in a hospital bed, had eaten him alive. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to weep out of me. Instead, I scanned every page. I backed up every photo. I saved every document. Twice. Then I logged into my lawyer's portal and uploaded the lot. Not because I needed more evidence, because I wanted it protected, because I was starting to understand. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every woman who'd ever poured herself out for a family that scraped her dry and then called her over-dramatic when she bled. 3 days later, Faraz called. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. "Mira's family is trying to intervene. They've requested a private mediation meeting." I almost laughed. Let me guess. To preserve their reputation? To avoid a formal court date, he corrected. They're worried if this hits public record, their name will be associated with elder theft. It's already starting to circulate. I smirked. Good. But, he added carefully, we can use that. If you're willing to sit down, just once, we can negotiate repayment and formal removal from all shared assets. Your choice. I didn't hesitate. Fine, 1 meeting, and I'm bringing the documents. Which documents? All of them. The mediation was held at a neutral legal office downtown. They came dressed like mourners at a funeral they caused. Mira in black like she thought it would evoke sympathy. Daniel in a blazer he probably couldn't afford. Her parents tagging along like silent guards, lips pinched, eyes darting, terrified of the scandal breathing down their necks. I walked in with Faraz in a plain leather briefcase. Before the mediator could even start, Mira leaned forward with forced sweetness. "I just want to say, "We're sorry. Things got messy. Everyone was emotional. You know how it is." I placed a hand on the table. "Don't insult my intelligence by playing gentle. You weren't emotional. You were opportunistic. There's a difference." Daniel muttered something under his breath. Faraz leaned forward. "We're here for resolution, not revisionist history." The mediator nodded. "Let's keep this productive." I opened the briefcase, took out the printed inventory, took out the footage screenshots, and then, softly, placed my mother's ring in the center of the table. "This is the only piece I got back," I said. "It survived. Just like me. Everything else? Gone." Mira reached out toward the ring, probably hoping for a tearful moment of forgiveness. I slapped her hand away. "Don't touch what you buried." She pulled back like I'd burned her. Daniel stared down at the table. For the next hour, Faraz walked them through the formal steps: repayment plans, deed revisions, restraining order boundaries, asset freezes, everything dry, legal, binding. But my voice only came back when the mediator asked one final question. "Is there anything you'd like to say to your family before this is finalized?" I looked straight at Daniel. "You could have asked me for help. You know that, right? You could have come to my hospital bed, sat beside me, held my hand." He didn't look up. "You could have said, 'Mom, we're scared. We're drowning. We don't know what to do.' And I would have given it all willingly, every dollar, every stone, because that's who I am." Mira scoffed. "So this whole show is about punishing us for not asking nicely?" "No," I said coldly. "This is about making sure I never forget that you didn't just take from me. You buried me alive and went shopping." The papers were signed, the accounts divided, the house returned. And as I left the room, Daniel finally raised his eyes to mine. They weren't angry anymore. They were empty. Good. He'd finally learned what it felt like to be hollow. The first sign that things were shifting came quietly. A missed call from a local reporter, then another, then a voicemail. "Hi, Mrs. Malik. We received a tip regarding a property fraud case involving your name. We'd love to hear your side before we publish." I didn't call back. I didn't need to. The story was already moving without me. 3 days after the mediation, a small but damning article appeared in the city's community bulletin. Just a few paragraphs tucked between a real estate blurb and a grocery coupon ad. But it had everything. Local woman returns from medical emergency to find family, sold her assets without consent. Lawsuit filed for theft, financial manipulation, and attempted fraud. Pawn shop footage confirms jewelry sale while victim was hospitalized. They didn't use names, but the neighbors knew, and soon, so did Mira's family, and Daniel's job. The first time I heard about the fallout was from Rima. She called, giggling into the phone like a child. "They canceled the family brunch," she said. "Apparently, Mira's mother can't bear to break bread with a disgrace." Her words, not mine. I didn't smile, not because I didn't enjoy it, but because it wasn't over yet. See, what they never understood is this. I'm not the kind of woman who yells. I'm the kind of woman who waits and then drops the entire truth in front of you when your hands are full and your lies are unraveling. So that's exactly what I did. I created a private page, a blog, if you want to call it that, password protected, no comments, just one story. Mine. I uploaded photos. The pawn slips, the footage stills, the receipts for every piece of heirloom jewelry, the letter from the hospital, the bank statements, and finally, the will revision, removing my son from everything with a single brutal line. Then I sent the password to 5 people. 1, Mira's mother. 2, Daniel's boss. 3, the president of Mira's Ladies' Heritage Society. 4, my old neighbor, who never missed a tea. 5, and the reporter who first left that voicemail. Not a word of commentary, just the facts. Let them draw the lines between. Let them choke on the dots they didn't connect in time. The next time Daniel reached out, it wasn't with an apology. It was a warning. "You need to stop," he snapped over the phone. "You've embarrassed us enough." "I haven't even started," I replied, calm as glass. "This affects more than just us. Mira's family is furious. My job—" "Do not say your job to me," I cut in. "Not when I was the one paying your bills for 6 months while you were secretly jobless. Not when I sold my gold chain to cover your child's daycare fees. Not when you forged my signature to take what little I had left." He fell silent. "I raised you better than this," I said, "but maybe raising wasn't enough. Maybe I should have taught you what it means to fall." "Mom," he started, voice softer now, almost trembling, but I hung up. Because I knew that voice. It wasn't guilt, it was fear. Faraz called that evening. "You've caused a ripple," he said, sounding almost impressed. I sipped my tea, watching the sky bleed into evening outside my new window. "Good. Would you like to issue a formal statement to the press?" "No," I said. "Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let my absence say everything." But the public didn't stay quiet. Someone leaked the story wider, and this time they did name names. The article went viral locally. Mother abandoned in hospital while family sold her past. She left her house. Now she's taking it back, one lawsuit at a time. And with it came comments, some cruel, some confused, but most were brutal to Daniel and Mira. If this is true, they deserve jail time. Selling her jewelry while she was unconscious, that's evil. Protect elderly women from family like this. Monsters wear wedding rings too. Daniel shut down his social accounts. Mira deleted hers. Her mother resigned from the Heritage Board. Daniel's company placed him on extended leave. They had begged for silence. Instead, I gave them an audience. Rima came to visit the following week. She brought rice pudding and stories. "They say Mira's sleeping in the guest room now," she said. "Apparently, Daniel blamed her for all of it, told her if she'd just waited to sell the jewelry, no one would have found out." I raised an eyebrow. He didn't say it was wrong, just that it was too fast. Rima nodded grimly. "They're not sorry, they're exposed. Good. Let them sit in it. Let them sit in every shameful inch of the life they built on bones and lies. I wasn't the weak one. I was just silent. But silence is dangerous, because when it ends, you never know what the woman you buried might dig up. They say that after a storm, things get quieter. They lie. After the media buzz, after the blog exposure, after the court dates started falling into place, my phone stayed quiet. But silence from people like Daniel doesn't mean surrender. It means they're regrouping. And sure enough, a week later, it happened. I was in the garden cutting away dead jasmine vines when my phone rang. It was a number I hadn't seen in decades. I froze. Then I answered. "Margaret?" The voice was older than I remembered, sharper, drier. "It's Richard, my ex-husband, Daniel's father, or so he thought." "I assume you already know why I'm calling," he said. I didn't say a word. "I just wanted to give you a heads up," he continued. "Daniel came to see me." The wind stopped moving. Even the leaves held still. "What?" "He showed up at my office," Richard said. Angry, crying, accusing me of abandoning him. Said I was a coward. Demanded answers. I closed my eyes. The weight pressing against my chest wasn't grief. It was something older, deeper, worn into my bones. "What did you tell him?" Richard exhaled. "The truth, that I was never his biological father, that you adopted him before we married, that I agreed to raise him, until I didn't." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "I didn't tell him everything," he added. "I kept your promise. I didn't tell him where he came from or what you sacrificed." "Thank you," I whispered. "I just thought you should know," he said. "He's unraveling. He's not looking for money anymore. He's looking for someone to blame." Of course he is. Of course, the moment the ATM stopped working, he went looking for the wiring behind it. "Thanks for the warning," I said, and hung up. I stood in the garden a long time after that, hands still in the soil, heart buried with them. Daniel came 2 days later. He didn't knock. He waited. I saw him from the upstairs window, leaning against the gate like a washed-up stranger, hair unkempt, jaw tight, eyes hollow, like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. He waited 7 hours, didn't move, didn't leave. At one point, he even slid to the ground, his back against the wall like some tragic fool from a bad novel. I didn't go out, but I watched. And when the sun began to set, he stood, looked up at the house and shouted, "Why didn't you tell me?" Birds scattered from the trees. The street went still. I closed the curtain. He wasn't here for answers. He was here to demand another story, one that made him the victim again, one where I was the villain, one where he could be angry without looking in a mirror, but he wasn't ready for the truth, not the real one. I never meant for him to know. The truth was tucked away so deep I'd almost forgotten it myself, like a wound you survive but never stop bleeding from. Daniel wasn't mine. Not by blood. He was mine by choice, by compassion, by consequence. I found him when I was volunteering at the Child Welfare Center. He was barely a year old, malnourished, frail, abandoned in a dumpster by the hospital, wrapped in a hotel towel, crying so softly the nurses didn't hear him until morning. The woman who found him said the towel was stiff with blood. They said he was born with a heart defect, that his parents left him because he wouldn't survive anyway, that he was a lost cause. I remember looking into his eyes, so full of fear it looked like hunger, and I remember thinking, if I walk away, I'll never be able to look at myself again. So I didn't. I adopted him. I brought him home, fought for every breath he took night shifts and day shifts and anything that paid, gave up the idea of having a child of my own because the man I was married to, Richard, said he didn't want someone else's broken child. He made me choose, and I chose Daniel. That decision cost me my marriage, my youth, my body, my health, but not once. Not once why did I ever regret it, until the day he called me a parasite, until the day he said I owed him for the rest of his life, until the day he kicked over my suitcase and told me I'd ruined his future. That day, I wondered if maybe love wasn't enough. Maybe saving someone doesn't make them yours. Maybe it just makes you a placeholder for the family they think they deserved. Faraz called again. He'd heard about the visit. "Do you want to press a no-contact order?" he asked. I paused. "No," I said. "Let him rot outside if he wants to." "You're sure?" "Yes, I'm not afraid of him. Let him sit in the mess he made." He sighed. "If you ever change your mind, just say the word." I didn't reply. Instead, I looked out the window again. Daniel was gone. Only the crushed petals of my hibiscus bush remained where he had leaned all day, and I wondered if he'd known the truth earlier, if he'd known how many nights I held his fevered body to my chest, willing his heart not to stop. Would it have changed anything? Would he have called me Mom with less entitlement? Would he have guarded me instead of looting me? I doubt it, because the problem was never that I didn't love him. It's that he never believed I had a life before him, that I was a person before he needed me. He thought I owed him everything simply because I gave him everything. And now that the giving was over, he had nothing left to take. 3 weeks passed. No messages, no uninvited visits, no half-hearted apologies slipped through the mailbox. It was almost enough to make me believe he'd moved on. But abusers don't always slam doors. Sometimes they slither back in through windows. It was a Friday. Quiet. Rain tapping against the windows, the way it used to on school mornings when I'd pack Daniel's lunch and double-knot his shoelaces so he wouldn't trip in the puddles. I was sipping tea, folding towels when the call came. Rima. "Don't panic," she said, which of course means start bracing yourself. "What happened?" She hesitated. Then, "Daniel started a live stream." I blinked. "A what?" Online, social media. It's gaining traction. He's telling people things about you, about your lawsuit, about being disowned after a coma. He's crying on camera, playing music in the background. You're the headline villain now. I didn't respond, because deep down I knew it was coming. Daniel always needed an audience. He couldn't live with silence, couldn't stand reflection. So he weaponized the one thing he still had, pity. I opened the app Rima mentioned, searched his name, and there he was, framed in soft lighting, hair unkempt, eyes glassy, voice trembling with just enough restraint to sound brave. "I never thought I'd say this publicly," he said, "but my mother left me, abandoned me after everything. I took care of her when she was sick. I begged her not to isolate herself, but she changed. She's not the same. She got rich and forgot who her real family is." A million tiny cuts, crafted into a script, a child begging for sympathy, a grown man rewriting the truth into tragedy. I kept watching. "Maybe I wasn't the perfect son," he added, sniffling, "but did I deserve to be erased, to be publicly humiliated? She sold our house, left us with nothing. She's not the woman who raised me." The comment section exploded. "This is so heartbreaking. Some parents forget how to love once they get money. Sending hugs, bro. Stay strong." He was trending, monetizing the grief he caused, selling betrayal as abandonment, lies wrapped in violin strings and sobs. He'd found a new way to rob me, and just like the first time, he thought I'd be too weak to fight back. That night, I called Faraz. "I want to respond." He paused. "You mean through me?" "No," I said, "through me." The next day, I registered my own account. No filters, no hashtags, no theatrics, just a live feed, one camera, my face, my truth. "Good evening," I began. "Some of you may know me, most of you don't. But if you've been watching a man cry on camera about how his mother abandoned him, let me fill in the parts he left out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult. I simply told the story of the adoption, the illness, the sacrifices, the stolen jewelry, the forged documents, the bank withdrawals, the pawn shop footage, the lawsuit, the silence, the lies. I shared screenshots, legal filings, photos of receipts and medical invoices. I played a 1-minute voice clip, Daniel's voice laughing in the pawn shop. "She's practically dead. Might as well clean out the closet before she croaks." The comments turned quickly. Some remained skeptical, others in denial, but most began to see. This can't be faked. He never said any of this. Now I don't know what to believe anymore. She's not angry. She's exhausted, and I believe her. But I saved the final blow for last. I leaned forward, looked into the lens like I was looking through decades. "Daniel," I said, "I gave you everything I never had. I buried my own name so you could write yours. And when I stopped letting you carve into me, you turned me into your villain." I exhaled slow, steady. "But I am not your mother anymore. You lost that title the moment you traded it for coins at a pawn counter." I ended the stream with one sentence. "A son is not a birthright. It's a bond, and you broke it." Daniel tried to retaliate. He went live again the next day, but his tears looked manufactured now. His stories sounded cracked. His tone teetered between desperation and rage. The spell had broken. Some viewers began leaving midstream. Others asked for proof. Some called him out in the comments. Eventually, he logged off, and this time he stayed off. A week later, the official court ruling came in. Full repayment order, asset forfeiture, public apology clause, lifetime no contact option. I didn't even blink as I signed the final document. Daniel had already left my life. This was just the paperwork to seal the door behind him. When the lawyer asked if I wanted the apology published publicly, I declined. "No audience," I said, "no more performances." This wasn't about vengeance anymore. This was about dignity. And mine wasn't a stage. It was a locked vault, and I just changed the code. The day after the court ruling, I woke up before the sun. No alarms, no anxiety, just instinct. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up to a to-do list, a demand, or a family member expecting to be spoon-fed a future I sacrificed to give them. I brewed my tea, stood barefoot in the kitchen, and just listened. Silence had always been a punishment in my old house. Now it felt like freedom. There was no tension in the air, no footsteps tiptoeing around shame, no passive-aggressive sighs from across the hall, just warmth, light, my breath. I opened the back door and stepped into the garden. The hibiscus bush Daniel crushed had begun to bloom again, soft, stubborn little reds pushing through the break like they didn't remember the weight that flattened them. I understood. I, too, had been crushed. I, too, was blooming anyway. I started small, booked a pottery class, attended it alone. I was the oldest person in the room by 20 years, and I didn't care. My hands shook on the wheel. My first vase collapsed. My second cracked in the kiln. But the third stood, ugly, uneven, but mine. I laughed the first time I held it, because it didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be real. The instructor asked what I was planning to use it for. Memory, I said. She smiled, not asking for more. Good, because I wasn't telling this story anymore unless I chose to tell it. I began donating the jewelry I recovered piece by piece, each with a note explaining its origin, its journey, and the name of the woman who once wore it. I didn't name Daniel or Mira, not once, because they didn't deserve to live in the same sentence as the legacy they tried to erase. I contacted a local women's shelter and gave them what I didn't keep: bracelets, bangles, necklaces from forgotten drawers, each one cleaned, boxed, and sent with a card that read, "This piece survived betrayal. So did you." It felt sacred, like I was pulling bones from the wreckage of an old temple and laying them gently in the hands of women who would know, who would understand. That jewelry was never about vanity. It was inheritance. It was history. It was proof that you existed. One afternoon, Rima and I sat in the living room drinking coffee and going through old photos. There was one of Daniel, maybe 4 years old, icing smeared on his chin, holding a balloon in one hand and a stuffed duck in the other. Rima stared at it for a long time. "He looks innocent," she said softly. I nodded. He was. "What do you think happened?" I sighed. "He forgot." "Forgot what?" "That love isn't transactional." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. We both knew how easily kindness gets mistaken for obligation, how often women like us, mothers, sisters, wives, give and give until the people around us stop recognizing it as a gift. They start treating it like air, always there, always owed, until you stop breathing for them. Then suddenly you're cruel, unfair, selfish. How dare you stop dying for them? That night, I took the final piece of my mother's ring and placed it into a glass box on my dresser. Not for display, for memory. I added a photo beside it, one of me. Not as a wife, not as a mother, not even as a survivor. Just me. Wearing the same soft smile I hadn't seen in decades. That smile didn't belong to someone who was back. It belonged to someone who had shed. I wasn't returning to anything. I was becoming. Faraz called again. He asked if I'd be interested in speaking at a conference, a panel on elder rights, financial abuse within families, legacy theft. People would listen to you, he said. Your story could help a lot of women. I told him I'd think about it, not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in my life, I was allowed to pause, allowed to choose. And maybe that was the greatest justice of all. It arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address. I almost tossed it with the junk mail, but the handwriting stopped me, sharp, familiar, slanted to the right like it had always been racing ahead of itself. Daniel. I stood at the kitchen counter for 10 minutes before opening it, not because I was scared, but because I didn't know what I wanted to feel. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. No salutation, no apology, just sentences. You knew all along I wasn't yours, and you lied. You built your whole identity around saving me, then destroyed mine when I stopped being grateful. I wanted you to be proud of me, but it was never enough. I'm not sorry. I just don't understand why you didn't tell me. I had a right to know. Maybe I would have hated you less if you hadn't pretended I belonged. My hands didn't shake, but I felt something cold slide down the middle of my spine. Not pain, not fear, just emptiness. Like being told your shadow never really belonged to you. I folded the letter back up and sat with it for a long while. He still didn't get it. Even after everything. He still thought this was about entitlement. Still thought love was a currency, and I'd faked the exchange rate. Still thought knowing the blood type behind his name gave him permission to hate me more efficiently. He didn't know the truth behind that adoption. Didn't know the nights I sat by his crib during cardiac arrests. Didn't know I once bled for 8 hours straight from exhaustion, but refused to go to the hospital because he had a fever. Didn't know I'd given up having more children because I couldn't risk splitting my attention while his life was so fragile. He didn't know because I never made him owe me anything. And now? He believed that lack of debt was proof of manipulation, that I was only good if I was always giving, and if I stopped, then I must never have meant it in the first place. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out my journal, the one I'd started the week after the hospital, the one where I kept letters I never sent. I wrote, "Daniel, you weren't born from my body, but you were born into my arms. And for 31 years, that was enough for me, until I learned it was never enough for you. I didn't lie to protect you. I stayed silent because I wanted to be your mother without condition, and you punished me for not making you earn it. If love needs receipts to be believed, then I hope one day you find someone who never stops invoicing you. This is not forgiveness. This is release. I free you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve the peace of letting go." Then I folded the journal closed, tied it with a ribbon, and placed it in the back of my closet, not for him, for me, for the version of me that needed to be reminded that love given freely is never wasted, only misplaced. 2 days later, Rima and I sat under the pergola in her backyard. She poured me jasmine tea and asked, "Do you think he'll come back?" I shook my head, not in the way he should. She sipped quietly, then said, "You know, you could have burned that letter." "I did," I said, smiling slightly, "just not with fire." As the sun lowered behind her garden wall, I felt something shift inside me. The kind of shift that happens when a wound finally stops itching. Not because it healed perfectly, but because you stopped picking at the scar. Daniel may never understand. He may never apologize. He may tell 1,000 more stories where I'm the villain, but I will not carry him anymore. Not in my guilt, not in my grief, not in my story. The last court notice came on a Tuesday morning, a stamped envelope, plain, formal, no drama, no surprise. It confirmed that all repayments had been processed, all restraining orders finalized, all legal ties severed. I was no longer Daniel Malik's legal guardian, no longer bound to him by blood, by bond, or by paperwork. For the first time in 31 years, I wasn't legally obligated to anyone. Not a husband, not a child, not a legacy that drained me dry. And instead of feeling grief, I felt gravity leave my bones, like I'd been walking in boots made of stone and someone had finally cut the laces. I spent the rest of that morning doing something simple. I cleaned, I swept, I polished. I opened every window in my home, let the wind in, let the dust out. Like I was exorcising grief, like I was inviting something new. Around noon, I made a choice. I opened my closet, pulled out a sari I hadn't worn in years, deep burgundy with gold trim, my mother's, one of the few things I'd saved before Daniel and Mira sold off what was left of her pieces. I wore it slowly, reverently, tied the pleats tight like armor, pinned the palu like a crown. Then I looked in the mirror, and there she was. Me. Not someone's mother, not someone's failure, not a woman recovering from theft, not a character in a man's sob story. A survivor. A woman who chose love, chose silence, chose boundaries, and when it was time, chose herself. I walked down to the market that afternoon. People stared a little, maybe from recognition, maybe from admiration, maybe from that quiet thing people sense when they see a woman who has stopped apologizing for surviving. One older woman passed me, then paused. She turned, smiled gently, and said, "You look full," like someone who finally took her name back. I smiled. I did. She nodded, touching my arm. "Good. We need more women who stop shrinking to make room for others." I held her gaze. "I'm done being smaller than my story." She laughed. Full belly, no shame. Good girl. Later that evening, I visited my mother's grave. It had been years. I brought two things, a single flower and the cracked ring I had recovered, the only piece that came back. I knelt down and whispered, "I didn't give it all away, Ma." I kept this, and myself. I left the ring at the base of her headstone, not to mourn, to mark, because that piece didn't belong to Daniel. It didn't belong to Mira. It belonged to her, to me, to the line of women who learned to carry their worth even when it was stolen, sold, or forgotten. That night, I sat down at my writing desk and wrote one final letter. But this time, it wasn't to Daniel, or Faraz, or the court. It was to Game Meads. Margaret Holden, you survived them. You outlived their expectations. You reclaimed every name they tried to rewrite. You are not broken, you are proof of what love looks like when it doesn't come with chains, of what freedom sounds like when it has a woman's voice, of what it means to walk away without looking back. I folded it, placed it in my journal, then closed it, because the story was finished. I no longer needed revenge. I had something better. Myself, whole, unapologetic, unbent. My name is Margaret Holden. I was betrayed, robbed, discarded by the ones I gave my life to. And for a while, I thought that made me weak. But now I known. They didn't break me. They revealed me. And I am done living in the shadows of people who feared my strength. I was never just their mother. I was never just their fool. I am the woman who survived them. And I'm just getting started.